I spent 11 years at Buckingham Palace as private chef to Queen Elizabeth.
For over 2 decades, Darren McGrady remained silent, observing from the margins as the royal narrative unfolded, delicately crafted and controlled by those in power. A former royal chef who once prepared meals for Queen Elizabeth II, Prince Charles, and the young Princes William and Harry, McGrady was far more than just a member of the palace staff. His loyalty rested firmly with Princess Diana. Now at 63, Darren is finally ready to share his truth. But these aren't just stories, they are startling revelations. At the core of his candid account is none other than Queen Camilla. What Darren reveals challenges the long-maintained royal narrative, shaking its very foundations. It all began with a single comment, an unexpected public statement that set off a storm Darren never anticipated. As the world geared up for the coronation of King Charles III and Queen Camilla, McGrady, long associated with Diana's memory, did the unthinkable. He publicly expressed support for the royal event. "The first time I saw Princess Diana was at Buckingham Palace, the royal wedding," he said. "Time has passed, and I believe it's possible to honor the present while still cherishing the past." While his words appeared calm, balanced, and respectful, the internet response was far from quiet. Social media platforms ignited. Supporters of Diana and royal followers were split, some praising Darren's maturity and his effort to bridge the past and the present, while others saw it as a shocking betrayal. "Diana's spirit will never rest if you celebrate the woman who broke her," one comment read. Another declared, "You were her chef, her confidant, you should be exposing Camilla, not applauding her." For years, Darren McGrady was regarded as a quiet guardian of Princess Diana's legacy. His silence, particularly regarding Camilla, had always intrigued the public. Despite multiple interviews over the years, he skillfully avoided addressing the woman many still associate with Diana's heartbreak. He never once commented directly on Camilla Parker Bowles, who had once been dubbed the most disliked woman in Britain. Considering Camilla's pivotal role in the deterioration of Diana's marriage, Darren's silence was powerful in itself. Even as late as 2005, public sentiment lingered, only 7% of Britain supported Camilla becoming queen. So when she was finally crowned in 2023 and Darren voiced his support, it felt like a complete shift in the values he once represented. Media headlines exploded. Darren McGrady was finally breaking his silence, and what he shared about Queen Camilla was far more disturbing than anyone expected. But before diving into the revelations, it's essential to understand Darren's life inside the palace, his early days, and the unique bond he shared with Princess Diana. When Darren McGrady first stepped through the majestic gates of Buckingham Palace in 1982, he was a young chef at the bottom of the ladder, ranked number 20 out of 20 in a tightly run kitchen led by a strict hierarchy. Guided by the seasoned French chef Gabriel Tscoumi, Darren learned not only how to cook for royalty but also how to navigate the unspoken rules of palace life. The atmosphere was rigid and formal, a place where routine ruled. Yet amid the coldness, one figure brought a sense of warmth and authenticity: Diana. Their first meeting occurred at Balmoral Castle, where the royal family vacationed in summer. Unlike other royals who sent servants with instructions, Diana walked into the kitchen barefoot in her dressing gown, requesting simple snacks like yogurt or juice for herself and her sons. She was always polite, grateful, and even lent a hand with stacking plates. Her humility and grace immediately stood out in a world built on protocol and distance. During those formative years, Diana brought a breath of fresh air into palace life. She infused joy into formal dinners, danced at royal events, and exuded a down-to-earth charm that made the palace feel more human. While Darren always addressed her formally, their bond deepened through daily routines and quiet familiarity. One such ritual was her nightly request for freshly pressed juice, carrot, apple, or celery, depending on her mood. However, as Diana's marriage to Prince Charles began to unravel, largely due to his ongoing relationship with Camilla, Darren noticed subtle changes. Her appetite waned. One night, she didn't ask for her usual juice. Concerned, Darren made it anyway. She drank it silently, and he couldn't help but notice that her eyes were red, as if she had been crying. These were the early signs of emotional strain, long before the tabloids picked up on the royal rift. In 1992, Diana and Charles officially separated. She left Buckingham Palace and relocated to Kensington Palace with her sons. Darren assumed his chapter in royal service had ended, until a surprising phone call came through. Diana wanted him to be her personal chef. He accepted without hesitation. Life at Kensington Palace was more intimate and relaxed, a world away from the grandeur of Buckingham Palace, but the emotional scars lingered. Camilla's shadow still loomed large. Rumors floated through palace halls. One particularly cruel claim said Camilla had told a friend, "Is officially mine. He always has been." Darren never knew if Diana had heard it, but he certainly witnessed the toll it took. Even in her pain, Diana never lashed out. Her poise, even during heartbreak, defined her. That's what made her Diana, Darren would later say. As their friendship deepened, Darren became a silent witness to her private battles that the public never saw. And at the core of those struggles was always Camilla. What did Diana confide in him behind those kitchen doors? What emotions lay beneath the calm she portrayed to the world? "I always knew I would never be queen," she once admitted. Even within the sanctuary of Kensington Palace, where she tried to create peace, the ghosts of betrayal and loss remained. Darren McGrady, once just a junior chef in the royal kitchens, had become one of the few who truly saw behind the curtain. His journey from servant to silent confidant reflects the unspoken emotional history of a princess who changed the monarchy, and the man who, after years of silence, is finally ready to speak. One serene evening after dinner, as Darren McGrady was finishing up his kitchen duties, Princess Diana entered, not to request a snack, but seeking solace. She stood quietly, eyes downcast, her voice no more than a whisper. "I've always known I'd never be queen," she murmured. "That girl who took my husband, she will be." The weight of her words struck Darren deeply. He found himself at a loss, unsure how to respond. But Diana wasn't looking for a reply. "You only have to listen," she added gently, dabbing a tear from her cheek. In that silence, years of emotional turmoil spilled forth. Diana had long feared being not only cast aside as a wife but also forgotten as the woman once poised to be Queen of England. The emotional toll of Prince Charles's unwavering bond with Camilla was something the newspapers could never fully articulate. Darren recalled countless arguments, tense, emotional clashes reverberating through the halls of Buckingham Palace. And at the heart of them was always the same name, Camilla. When the infamous Camillagate tapes surfaced in 1993, confirming long-whispered suspicions, the world gasped. But for McGrady, it simply made public what he had silently witnessed for years. Diana never spoke directly about the tapes to him, she didn't need to. Her withdrawn manner, the meals she left untouched, the sorrow in her gaze, those signs said enough. Her eating disorder worsened during this time, and though ever respectful of her privacy, Darren quietly noticed the deepening distress. Then came Diana's 1995 interview on BBC's Panorama, a raw, revealing moment that shook the monarchy. Her confession, "There were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded," reverberated around the world. It was the first time her pain was expressed in her own words, validating what Darren and a select few had long known. She spoke openly about self-harm and about seeking help in all the wrong ways. In doing so, she gave voice and strength to countless others silently facing similar struggles. Over time, though still carrying grief, Diana began to rebuild herself. A year into her new life at Kensington Palace, Darren noticed a change. She laughed more, ate better, and immersed herself in meaningful work. In a courageous act, she publicly acknowledged her battle with bulimia, transforming her vulnerability into a force of empowerment for many. "She looked the healthiest I'd ever seen her," Darren later recalled. She was rediscovering her identity, piece by piece. But then came the day Diana didn't return home. It was a quiet Sunday morning at Kensington Palace, and Darren McGrady was preparing a simple meal for her arrival. She was expected back from Paris that evening after a short trip. The plan was to share a peaceful evening with her sons, Prince William and Prince Harry, before they resumed school. Everything pointed to a calm day, home-cooked food, family time, and a brief escape from the pressures of royal life. But in a heartbeat, that tranquility shattered. A flicker on the television announced breaking news: Princess Diana had been in a car crash. At first, Darren dismissed it as a cruel rumor. But as more channels confirmed the tragedy, dread set in. Diana was gone. She had perished in a Paris tunnel, pursued by paparazzi, just 36 years old. Clinging to disbelief, Darren rushed to the palace, still hoping the reports were wrong. But once Diana's last will was delivered, the devastating reality took hold. There would be no homecoming, no dinner, no warm reunion with the boys. The halls of Kensington were flooded with sorrow. Staff members who had stood beside Diana in both joy and pain were left broken. Darren quietly remembered the meal he had prepared for her, left untouched, waiting for someone who would never return. The global reaction was immense. Millions mourned outside Kensington Palace, laying flowers and tributes. Elton John's revised version of Candle in the Wind became the anthem of a world in mourning. But amid the overwhelming grief, a subtler tension began to grow. Whispers emerged that Camilla Parker Bowles had expressed interest in attending Diana's funeral, perhaps to mend public perception. Some saw it as a gesture of reconciliation. But reportedly, Queen Elizabeth intervened, ensuring Camilla did not attend. Darren believed this was the right decision. The world would never have forgiven her, he said. For him, Camilla's presence would have felt like intruding on a scene she helped create. With that decision, Diana's funeral proceeded, an event etched forever in the memory of millions. Yet one more chapter remained to be written, the wedding Darren couldn't bring himself to witness. When Prince Charles and Camilla Parker Bowles finally married on April 9, 2005, the ceremony was presented as a long-overdue resolution. Held at Windsor Guildhall, followed by a blessing at St. George's Chapel, the event was intended to mark peace and closure. But for Darren McGrady, who had cooked for Diana during her most painful years, it was far from a happy ending. "I didn't watch. I didn't attend. I couldn't," he admitted. "That day belonged to Diana in my heart." Though he had moved to the US and built a successful catering business, his emotional bond with Diana never faded. As the wedding approached, McGrady received hushed messages from former palace colleagues, fellow staff who had once served Diana. They all expressed the same unease. Something about the celebration felt cold, as if history was being rewritten. For Darren, the union didn't symbolize closure, it marked the quiet erasure of Diana's pain. They got what they wanted, he said, but the cost was Diana. What troubled him further were the subtle shifts inside the palace after Camilla's arrival. Staff members loyal to Diana were reassigned or dismissed. Charities she had championed were overlooked. It was as if her vibrant presence was being slowly removed, like a portrait taken down without a word. One memory haunted Darren. Diana had once softly said, "I'll never be queen. That girl who took my husband will be." On the day of Charles and Camilla's wedding, those words echoed more powerfully than ever. And Darren wasn't alone in noticing. Behind palace doors, something far more calculated was unfolding, an organized, quiet fading of Diana's legacy. Could this have been the intention all along? For years after Diana's untimely death, Darren McGrady kept his silence. Out of grief, yes. Out of respect, certainly. But perhaps also because the truth he held was too painful, too incendiary to share. His silence wasn't empty, it carried the weight of unspoken truths, lasting sadness, and growing concern about the palace's inner workings. When he finally chose to speak, his revelation sent tremors through the corridors of Buckingham Palace and far beyond. Now in his 60s, Darren McGrady had spent years working closely with Princess Diana, seeing her not just as royalty but as a compassionate soul who brought warmth into the traditionally cold and formal spaces of the monarchy. So, when he observed the subtle changes that began after Camilla moved into Clarence House, and later Buckingham Palace, he could no longer remain silent. It started quietly, so subtly that most wouldn't have noticed, but to those who truly knew Diana, it felt as if her essence was being erased, one piece at a time. McGrady remembered how the personal touches Diana had carefully added to her private quarters began to disappear, the soft pastel tones she loved, the cherished family photographs she proudly displayed, and even her favorite flowers, forget-me-nots and lilies, were all replaced with Camilla's preferences. Furniture was rearranged or removed entirely. To Darren, this wasn't just redecorating, it was a calculated attempt to rewrite history. What struck him most was the removal of Diana's photographs, images that once filled palace hallways with joy, motherly love, and humanity. Gradually, those photos were moved out of public view, first relegated to less visible spots, then hidden in private rooms, until they disappeared altogether. Only one remained, tucked away in a room never open to the public. But even that solitary photo eventually vanished. For McGrady, that was the final, devastating blow. It wasn't even Diana anymore, he said. It was just a photograph. And even that was too much for her. That was the moment Darren uttered the words that would echo across global headlines, "She is pure evil." He didn't say it for publicity, nor out of bitterness. It was a statement rooted in disbelief and deep affection for the woman he had served faithfully. He believed these erasures were not random, they were deliberate, strategic moves to gradually push Diana's memory into oblivion. Palace insiders tried to explain the changes as part of a natural evolution, Camilla's role increasing with her growing public presence. But for McGrady, and others who had known Diana personally, that explanation rang hollow. This wasn't just about progress, it was about historical revision. McGrady reflected on the stark contrast between the two women. Diana had brought a sense of spontaneity, empathy, and light into the palace. She would walk barefoot into the kitchen, politely requesting a glass of orange juice, or quietly fill her car with blankets for the homeless. Her compassion was unmistakable. But once Camilla moved in, the air grew colder, the laughter faded, and the palace began to lose the human touch Diana had infused so naturally. Even as Camilla ascended from private companion to queen consort, McGrady remained mostly quiet, living in the United States, running a successful catering business, and honoring Diana's memory through charitable work. But watching Camilla's rise stirred something within him. He supported the coronation, he said, because he believed in looking ahead, but not at the expense of the truth. He wasn't lashing out. He was defending Diana's story. She endured so much, he said. The least I can do is protect her story, all of it, even the uncomfortable parts. In the royal household, every item, be it a chair, a painting, or a photograph, is subject to strict tradition. The royals don't redecorate on a whim. Every change must go through layers of authority, from the master of the household to the Royal Collection Trust, and in many cases, even the reigning sovereign. So, when Diana's iconic wedding portrait vanished from public display at Clarence's house without any formal acknowledgement, it represented more than poor taste, it was a breach of royal protocol. There was no respectful relocation, no archiving for historical preservation. The photo was discarded, unceremoniously, in what McGrady saw as a deliberate act. Camilla's arrival, he believed, marked more than a new chapter, it signaled a complete break from the past. The image, once a symbol of Diana's rightful place in royal history, had been erased without a trace. It was a silent declaration that the monarchy no longer wished to remember. As Darren McGrady's revelations spread, they ignited a firestorm on social media. Within hours of his interview's release, public reactions poured in. His heartfelt honesty gave voice to suspicions that had lingered for decades, especially among Diana's devoted followers. Many had always believed that Diana was mistreated during her life and even more so after her death. "Darren, thank you for finally telling the truth," one user wrote. "You've said what so many of us have felt for years." Thousands echoed similar sentiments, applauding McGrady's loyalty and courage. For many, his words validated years of public speculation and pain, finally offering confirmation from someone who had been on the inside. But not everyone welcomed his comments. Some questioned his timing, why speak now, especially after expressing support for the coronation. Others accused him of seeking attention or capitalizing on long-settled wounds. Yet McGrady's defenders were quick to respond. "He kept quiet for over 2 decades," one supporter noted. "If anyone has earned the right to speak, it's him." As McGrady's statements reignited Diana's legacy, old interviews, quotes, and photos resurfaced across social media. Fan pages honoring Diana surged in popularity overnight. The message was unmistakable: the world had not forgotten the people's princess. And McGrady's voice had reopened a wound that, for many, had never fully healed. Now, with his revelations reverberating across headlines, Queen Camilla's carefully managed public persona faces a critical reckoning. For years, she had transitioned from the other woman to an increasingly accepted royal figure. But Darren's revelations cast a new and unforgiving light on her actions behind the scenes, prompting many to ask, what comes next? Supporters of the monarchy argue that Camilla has earned her place and deserves a future free from past judgment. But for Diana's loyalists, her ascension still feels steeped in betrayal. While palace insiders remain predictably silent, following the royal mantra of never complain, never explain, public silence may no longer be sufficient. With Darren McGrady's explosive claims coming so close to Camilla's coronation, the tension between public perception and royal tradition has reached a boiling point. The world is now watching Queen Camilla more closely than ever before. How long can the palace maintain its composure? And what do you think about McGrady's stunning revelations? Share your thoughts below. Don't forget to like and subscribe.